For some reason, I'm always falling back to Alpha 3. It's the one Street Fighter game that I come across time and again. And I'm gonna say this right now, Alpha 3 was the fighting game that I played consistently from 1998 to 2000. There was no other. I was on this thing for at least 2 to 3 hours a day, and sadly, it was all on the PS1. So yeah, I wasn't exactly getting the arcade experience that I wanted. And the first time I actually took my skills to the arcade, I got my butt kicked pretty badly. Regardless, I had a great time, and I always seem to pick up this game on whatever console it's on, whether it's in a collection or just an arcade port. However, there was one version of the game that was out of reach for a while, or more like I was avoiding it. It wasn't until I saw my comments on my last Street Fighter Alpha 3 review that I decided to actually go for it. So here we are. I'm going to be reviewing Street Fighter Alpha 3 for the Game Boy Advance. I'm not gonna lie, I was expecting the gameplay on Street Fighter Alpha 3 for the GBA to be compromised, much like Street Fighter Alpha 2 on the Super Nintendo. But to my surprise, the fluidity, rhythm, and pace of the fights pretty much remain the same as it was in arcades. The only notable thing that I could point out is that the time penalty for the guard crushers is slightly shorter. But besides that, gameplay is as authentic as it could be. The CPU behavior is different somewhat though. It's more aggressive and will not waste an opportunity to punish you if you happen to miss an attack or give yourself an opening. I found myself playing more carefully to the point of exploiting patterns on some of these opponents, especially Zangief, who will continually 360 power drive you any chance he gets. I seriously dreaded fighting this guy. Unlocking characters and modes are simply done by playing the game, either by playing single player or some of the various modes such as survival, dramatic, and final boss. However, the lack of a world tour that's available on other ports definitely hurts this version of the game, and it is one of the reasons why I avoided it for so long. Particularly since this is on a portable, I was expecting customized characters with numerous unlockable isms to play against friends. You could enable these various isms by playing Final Battle multiple times and selecting them in the options menu, but it's not the same as picking a character and then leveling them up in the World Tour. The visuals look great on Nintendo's 32-bit handheld. Of course, the sprites had to be downscaled yet again to fit the GBA small screen, and background details had to be cut back. But for what's here, I have to say, it is one of the better looking titles on the platform. There's great use of color that matches the tone that was in arcade, and the animation is mostly intact. Every character even has backwards walking animation, which was actually missing in the PlayStation version, though some specific character animation frames look a little off. It's like they resized the sprite without touching it up, but it passes by so fast you hardly notice. Sadly, several stages are missing, which is a bummer. This makes several fights during gameplay a little weird since characters are either sharing a stage or outright rotate between stages. Music sounds... well, you all know that I don't particularly like the Alpha 3 soundtrack. Still, it's pretty crisp, and sound better than most GBA games. It retains the mood of the arcade original, but what is a little jarring would be the missing tracks, usually the ones that go with the missing stages. And for some reason, the same track plays back to back, no matter what stage you're on. It doesn't bother me much since I never liked the OST to begin with, but it might irk others. Just like the music, the sound effects and voice samples are clear and pretty much near arcade quality. Definitely a step up from Alpha 2 on the SNES. The emotion, the character is felt through the tiny speaker. Still, some voice clips are missing, taken away from the fighter's personality, particularly during their win animations. The weakest aspect of this port, no doubt, would be the controls. I spent a good portion of time playing this on a Gameboy Advance SP, and it was probably the most frustrating time I've ever had playing Street Fighter. Performing special moves is simple enough. Pressing down on a D-pad is responsive with no latency, so it retains the Alpha's feel in that aspect. But by all means, Street Fighter Alpha 3 is a 6-button game. Being restricted to 2 shoulder buttons and 2 face buttons is quite confusing, especially since activating the 2 missing buttons is done by holding the shoulder button down and pressing down one of the face buttons. There is an option you could use to adjust the controls to your liking, but for anyone who's used to playing this on either a pad or arcade stick, you're better off trying your luck with a Game Boy player. Though if you're gonna go that route, might as well play this on any other console. Menus and the overall layout of the game pretty much matches its bigger console counterparts. It's easy to navigate and access the variety of modes and options available. Transition between stages is also seamless, though the story suffers due to Crawfish removing specific dialogues between characters as well as their endings. It looks like there was an attempt to retain these story elements, since there is a pause after the character's predetermined fight finishes, and even the first frame of your opponent getting up is seen. The exclusion of the cast story does affect the replay value, though some of the lockables do make up for it, and it is a portable, so the story might not have been a priority. there you have it, guys. Street Fighter Alpha 3 on the Game Boy Advance. I gotta give this version of Alpha 3 a B. It's an excellent port. The gameplay's there, the fighting's there, the animation's there. It totally feels like Alpha and an 8 megabyte cart. Now, the thing that keeps it from a perfect A would be two issues I have with it. One would be the controls. By all means, this game was meant to be played on a 6-button controller or 6-button arcade stick. Being restricted to 2 face buttons and 2 shoulder buttons, it was not fun. I have to admit that it was not fun. I'm used to playing this on like either a PlayStation controller or arcade stick, and I spent a good portion on this on my SP and was barely making any progress. Granted, I finally got used to it, but it was a bit of a struggle, I have to admit. It was a bit of a struggle, but you know, I had to play. I just had to play that way because let's be honest, not everyone had access to a Game Boy player back in the day. So there's that. Another thing would be the story. Now, there wasn't much story to begin with, but for what was there, I sorely missed. The endings and the interaction between the fighters, I just don't understand. There should have been enough space to add a couple of lines of dialogue just to kind of flesh out the story, because that was the first time I remember seeing something like that between characters, and not having it in here was kind of disappointing. But if you could look past that, this is a pretty awesome port. It fetches for around $35. However, if you're a hardcore Street Fighter player, you got better options out there. You know, you got the Street Fighter Anniversary Collection, you got the Alpha Anthology, you got the various ports on PlayStation, Saturn, Dreamcast, PSP. But if you're just kind of curious or just trying to flesh out your Game Boy Advance collection, you can't go wrong with this. Anyway, this was Knockout 21. Please comment, rate, and subscribe. And like always, have a good one. Take care, you guys.